classification is not only basic to thought, but in a way, it's basic to the operation of the human nervous system. For of each one of the neurons that compose our nervous system, it can be said that it has only two states. A state corresponding to yes, and a state corresponding to no. Like an electric current is either on or off. And in the same way that, for example, the television camera scans a given scene, such as my face, and sends impulses along a wire to the transmitter and then to your set. These impulses are fundamentally of a yes or no character. And the structure of the screen at which you are looking is something like that grid structure which I showed you a moment ago spread over the black flame. And it reinterprets the picture in terms of ever so many little units of on or off, yes or no. So in the same way, the great computer machines which scientists build to give mechanical equivalents to the human mind use, in most cases, what we call binary arithmetic. That is to say, a number system in which there are simply two numbers, 1 and 2, corresponding approximately to the same duality of yes and no on which all thought is based, and which is also the basis of classification. When we put, in other words, when we put phenomena into mental boxes and we class them, the fundamental question is it in this box or is it not in this box? And this is the basic principle of science, which it elaborates in the most marvelously complex ways. And I think we might think about some of these more complex forms. The scientist, as I said, does not simply consider the world in terms of such very simple patterns as the grid or the set of squares drawn over a form which he wants to describe accurately. To go to an opposite extreme, the task of the mathematician, who is fundamental to all science, is really to think up complex patterns. And the pure mathematician doesn't bother his head particularly as to whether the patterns in algebra or geometry with which he's concerned bear any resemblance to events in the real world. For example, we would say that in the real world we live in a space, a physical space, in which there are only three dimensions. There's the dimension of height, of width, and then in perspective we can represent the dimension of depth. And we feel that in the real world, in the physical space with which we're familiar, we can only have three right angles drawn about a point. The right angle between height and width, the right angle between depth and height, and the right angle between depth and width. But, of course, the mathematician can, in theory, think of an infinite number of right angles around the spot in a kind of imaginary space that we cannot visualize with our senses. And you can say, for instance, that a line drawn this way is also at right angles to all the other dimensions. And go on and on and on, inventing an apparently fantastic space which has infinitely many dimensions. Now, it may so turn out that this speculation, this construction of a fantastic pattern, does have some actual application to nature. And the mathematical equations which are concerned with spaces of infinitely many dimensions are actually applicable to fluctuations in processes and things of that kind. But this was an entirely unexpected application. So the fundamental task of science is to invent patterns and see in applied science whether these patterns enable us to comprehend the behavior of the physical world. There's another sense in which patterns may be used to explain things. Supposing I draw such a figure as this. Question, what is it? Now, there are various ways of explaining and making what appears to be, at the moment, a sort of nonsensical abstraction, the very sort of thing we run across in the natural world, of making some sense of it. Now, supposing I say that is a drawing of a tree trunk with lopped off branches. This immediately, in your mind, makes sense of the picture because it is related to something with which you're familiar. In another sense, it is classical. It has given an intelligible pattern to these lines which I scratched out on the board. But supposing we offer another explanation of it and say it's a bear climbing a tree. Of course, the bear is hidden behind the tree. This gives you an entirely different picture of the same original drawing. And so in the same way, when the scientist explains various natural phenomena, let's say we see a partial eclipse of the sun. Now, if you are a member of a culture which firmly believes that eclipses of the sun are the result of the sun being eaten up by a dragon, you will see something here corresponding to what you see in this drawing when you say, oh, it's a bear climbing a tree from behind. You will have in your mind's eye a highly complex and elaborate version of what's going on here, something in fact like this. There will be the dragon eating up the sun. Now, you won't perhaps actually visualize that dragon in the same way that when I tell you that this is a bear climbing a tree, you will almost, see the bear behind it. Here it is. Almost in your mind's eye, you see that bear. And almost in your mind's eye, if you really believe that the partial eclipse of the sun is caused by a dragon, you will believe that you see the dragon. But on the other hand, if the scientist explains it more simply and says a partial eclipse of the sun is simply caused by the moon crossing the sun, you will have a simple picture like that. So these are the ways in which the scientist is giving an account of the world. He is assimilating things that we don't know, patterns that we don't understand, patterns that we do understand. So the question arises further in exploring what is the function of science. You ask, why do we want to do that? Why do we want to be able to describe the world in terms and in patterns that we can understand? Surely the answer is that if we can interpret the unknown in terms of the known, we can describe what is going on in the world in regular patterns, we can predict what things are going to do next. In other words, if a pattern is regular, it is regular not only in shape, say, it will also be regular in rhythm. We time the apparent rising of the sun, and we find that it rises daily in a regular rhythm. And so every new day, we feel we can bet on the sun following the same rhythm since it has done so for so long. And so then further, what is the point of predicting future events? Obviously the point of predicting what is going to happen is that it enables us to control what is going to happen, to adapt our own actions accordingly, and therefore to establish what we call technical control over our physical environment. In this way, then, you could say that the purpose of science is to control both our own nature, physical nature, in order that the human race may survive as comfortably as possible in its natural surroundings. And you will see that that involves, in other words, a constant superimposition of human ideas of order upon the apparent disorder which we first find when we look at the natural world. In other words, when a baby is born, or when a blind person first acquires the gift of sight through a surgical operation, what they see with their eyes is a chaos. A mature blind person who has never seen what is enabled to see by an operation, first of all finds the experience of sight extremely confusing. He can't make any sense out of it at all. And he has to learn it. In other words, he has to interpret what he doesn't know, the objects of vision, in terms of what he does know in the sense of touch. He has to realize, for example, that the four corners of a table which he sees out there are related in a square pattern. And he has to understand how what he sees, the unknown, is related to what he has felt with his eyes closed, through his fingertips, the known. And in this way, then, the whole task of applied science is, as it were, to assimilate the world of knowledge to the patterns of human order, and rather the same way that when we eat, assimilate
dead bulls and dead vegetable and egg and all that kind of thing, we absorb them in and we assimilate them physical organization of the human body. Knowledge is, in other words, a form of eating. Just for the two processes are equal to assimilation. And for the extension of man's control of the nature might metaphorically be described a mental eating up of the universe. And as a result of the process, organizing of human life, its systems of communication and systems of control extend more and more and more. Just the same, for example, that by assimilating the minerals out of the soil, the rays out of sunlight, the plant like fern grows and grows and extends its form, and in a way, its organization fails. Now then, you take
this task of what we call the conquest of nature, the task of making order victorious over chaos or randomness. If you take this seriously, you will look upon it as warfare. And you will firmly believe that the most urgent thing that there possibly can be is to make order prevail over randomness, to make good prevail over evil, to make life prevail over death. And we find that when we are in a contest of this kind, a serious warfare game of this kind, and we take it seriously, we are involved in it in a very deep and bitter sense. Now, the difference of Buddhism from science as a form of knowledge is that in Buddhism it would be said that this view of things, this view of the task of life as making order triumph over disorder, leaves something out. You remember right at the beginning I made some importance of a Sanskrit word which is fundamental in Buddhism, avidya. Avidya, which meant a means non, vidya, knowing. Non-knowing or ignorance, or better, ignorance. Ignorance, in other words, leaving something out of account. And I want to use a familiar illustration to show in what way we ignore. You see here a figure which is apparently, as you look at it, two faces in profile about to kiss each other. Now if we draw back a little from those two faces, we can see on the white area in between the form of a cup. But the interesting thing about this is that as you look at it, you will either be able to see the form of the cup or the form of the two faces in profile, as it were, about to kiss each other. You can alternate between them very rapidly, but you will not be able to see them both that way at the same time. In other words, either the white must be the background and the black the figure on the ground, or else the black must be the background and the white cup showing up on it. And so in this way, we are unable to see, really, we can think, after a while we can get accustomed to the idea, that the figure and the ground, the black and the white, are mutually necessary to each other. In that figure that I showed you, if you could say, both the cup with the stem and the two faces are there, but our ideas about them, our concepts, are mutually exclusive, and we cannot see them both at the same time. And in the same way, in this figure that I drew, we either see the sawn-off stumps or the bear claws. It's difficult to see this figure both ways at the same time. And so, also, just as we see one and not the other, so we identify ourselves. After all, when you're looking at the white figure in that illustration, which is the cup, you, as it were, identify with the cup. When you look at the two faces, you identify with the profile. So in the same way, when we experience the world around us, we identify with the subject, the knower. We don't identify with what we see. But as a matter of fact, if there is nothing seen, there is no experience of a seer. If there is no seer, there is no experience of anything seen. They both go together in the same way as the black and the white. And this idea that the yes and the no, the black and the white, the inside of a class, say we draw a square as representing fundamentally the idea of class. I can't have a square which doesn't have both inside and outside. They go together. And in Buddhism, this going together is called shunya. Although this is often translated void, it means that the inside of the square cannot exist, is void without the outside, the subject without the object, the black without the white. This, of course, is represented in this fundamental Chinese figure of the yang, or the positive principle, and the yin, or the negative principle, like two fishes, constantly circulating, going round and round and round and round in the alternations of life. Now, the question is, are these two fishes involved in a fight? Is one eating up the black one, and the black one trying to eat up the white one? If that is the situation, then of course, life is fundamentally nothing but a grim contest. If this one up here is the good fellow, this one is the bad fellow, if this is order, this is chaos, then a fight goes on between them. That's largely the way in which our technology has interpreted man's situation as against nature. This is man, the white, the good fellow. This is nature, the dark, the bad fellow. The white one has got to eat him up. But what happens if the white fish succeeds in eating up the dark? The white fish disappears as well as the dark one, because the white one is only there in relation to the dark. So then, if these two fishes, as it were, wake up, if this one wakes up, this one wakes up, which is called awakening in Buddhism, they realize they're one. In other words, they go together. They're inseparable from each other. And this realization is that experience, which is called in Zen Satori, or in Buddhism Bodhi, awakening. This sudden dawning on our consciousness that life is not really economics. To make yes triumph over no, to make positive triumph. The two sides go together. And then one sees in a strange way that underlying all that is negative, all that is in the way painful and evil, there is a kind of necessity. It goes with the good. It is necessary for the good. Disorder is necessary for the manifestation of order, just as you must have, say, a black background to show up a light figure. And then when one sees that, a profound transformation takes place in one's attitude. That is to say, instead of looking upon life as a contest, dance, a game, one doesn't withdraw from it, one doesn't stop living, but one goes into the game so that these revolving fishes are no longer trying to beat each other, but they're just going around dancing, having the biggest fun in the world. So then, must we have fixed in our minds the idea that all the forms and patterns of nature are simply methods of attack or defense, that they're devices for camouflage, that they're simply lures for sexual attraction or other utilitarian purposes? Or can we see in them a dance, a joyous cosmology?
This is NET, National